I am an engineer by first degree. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an educator, and I am a consultant. I own a management consulting firm. And I would say, in terms of my role as the chair for the Women's Network Advisory Board, I have always been one of the few women in the room because I started my career as an electrical engineer. I think I got very, very used to being just one of a few females. And as time has gone on, I found myself in the role of being able to mentor other women who were coming through STEM careers. And so I would say I started there. I have always been somebody that is about lifting others up, and I do a lot of mentoring, both for nonprofits and on my own with people that have come up through my firm or my students. I taught for 20 years at the Graduate School of Business at Northeastern, and I guess the Women's Network Advisory Board became a natural place for me to land because it was about women across career journeys at all different stages in their career. And we were members. My firm, MIDIOR, has been a member of the chamber for a very long time. And so helping out with the Women's Network Advisory Board was pretty important. So it was very in keeping with me and what I cared about. And then we got involved, and I got involved in trying to make this organization and the Women's Network the best that it could be in terms of lifting women up and lifting our voices up. And so maybe that's how I got to where I am, at least in terms of my role as chair of the Women's Network. The Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Women's Network is one of a kind. We have many women's organizations in the Boston area, in the greater Boston area, but the Women's Network is unique because it does bring together women across industries, across career journeys, across stage of career, and the tie that binds us all is that we work in the greater Boston area. And so from my perspective, that's special because we can all spend a lot of time in our domain or going to do volunteer work with things that we're interested in or being associated with industry groups and so forth. But at the Women's Network, you have the opportunity to meet all kinds of women. And frankly, it has been one of the most valuable experiences that I have had. And I am currently chairing the Women's Network Advisory Board, and I know my term is coming to a close, but I will absolutely stay involved. The Women's Network has also provided women who are earlier in their career in our firm an opportunity to get some professional development that they might not otherwise get at my firm. I own a boutique, smaller consultancy, and the Women's Network offers leadership programs and other kinds of programming that has really been able to help women in my company. And so that has been very valuable to me as well. My time as the chair of the Women's Network Advisory Board has been great. It was interesting because I came in 2021 on the heels of the COVID pandemic. And at that point, the chamber was getting its arms around how to recast programming. We were mostly virtual. We were still at a time that people were skeptical and hesitant to come to in-person events. But we were successful with our Pinnacle Awards that year, and in addition, we moved I think the time for the Pinnacle Awards, if I recall correctly, in 2021. We did that very, very quickly, and so the beginning of my term was a bit of a scramble for all of us to get our logistics adjusted to accommodate the world that we were then living and working in. From there, one of the things that was important to me as a chair was to extend our reach and our access for small business leaders and women that worked in small business. And we've modified the programming accordingly. So we still have some of our bigger events. We have Pinnacle, we have Women's Network Breakfasts, but we also decided to rotate the location of our events so that they were in different neighborhoods across the city. We decided to try to have the location be hosted by women-owned businesses. And what that did was that drew, I think, a different segment of women. It made us more accessible because by being in different locations in the city, we were more accessible, and we varied the time. And so my job, and this is very much in keeping with who I am a starter and changer of things. And I hope that my tenure as chair has broadened our reach, and we've mixed it up enough so that we have been able to, I guess, attract more different women, not just women from a certain career, not just women at a certain level, not just women in a certain location. The other thing we've done is we have mixed up the way that we do our Women's Network Advisory Board meetings, so we have some virtual and some in person, and that also allows for, I think, more attendance and more engagement. So my term as chair has been awesome. I have to give the chamber a shout out. I mean, they are the whole team is such a pleasure to work with. I don't think I've ever worked with an organization that has had as many of its I's dotted and T's crossed, that cares about each other, cares about the volunteers, believes in the programming, and really walks that walk. And so that is probably the thing that I'm going to miss the most. In terms of my experience as board chair, I think working with the Chamber's team has been a pleasure. Figuring out how we are going to attract and retain the women that come to our events has been something that has meant a lot to me. One of the things that makes me smile is when I am getting to open an event that I'm really excited about attending myself, and I ask who in the room is here for the first time, and half the room's hands go up. That just warms my heart. And I also feel as though during my term, I have had the opportunity to focus on some different topics. Some of that was simply because we're in a different world, right? We are not just doing Women's Network breakfasts and having bigger speakers. And the pandemic has created both challenge and opportunity for women that was really worth diving into. And so at every one of our advisory board meetings, one of the things that we've done is had breakouts, and we've explored those topics and brought them back. And in terms of the focus of our events have been varied. They've featured panel discussions with women from different industries talking about their career journeys. That was a recent event that we did. We have been able to really speak to how to lift up women of diverse backgrounds into positions of leadership. And so those have really been points of pride for me. But really, the whole thing's been awesome. The value of being part of the Women's Network maybe starts with the name, which is it's a network. It is a women's network, and we are welcoming to all, and our objective is to connect women across tenure in their career, across career journeys, across industries, with each other. It's a pretty basic agenda. We also are interested in lifting women's voices up. And in order to do that, you have to be accessible, you have to model that behavior, you have to give people the opportunity to speak. In terms of being part of the Women's Network, you do have an opportunity to have your voice lifted up. You do have an opportunity to raise your voice in support or against a particular issue or thing that is happening in the city. I think being part of the Women's Network gives you an opportunity to shape Boston, to shape the workforce, the future nature of the workforce for women, and not just in terms of how it looks and feels, but in where the focus is, in what we need for allyship, in terms of how we can support other women, both peers above us, coming up behind us. You know, we as a women's network hopefully are shaping at least a portion of the future leadership of Boston. And so by being part of the Women's Network, you have the opportunity to be a part of that. Whether you're interested in being a leader in the city, in the workforce, for business or not, you have an opportunity to shape it. My biggest piece of advice for anybody, and especially for women, is to stay true to yourself, to be authentic, to be you all the time. Now that doesn't mean that you don't or shouldn't tune yourself to a particular circumstance, but I would say that authenticity is the thing that makes each of us our own self, makes each of us an individual. And as an individual, and especially as a female leader, we have the opportunity to do things differently, to think about things differently, to share our wisdom and our thoughts in a different manner. And so my piece of advice is to be authentic. I would also say, and I say this to anybody that I mentor or that works for me, pay it forward always. Always pay it forward. If somebody asks you for help, say yes, and then say how. I think most of us are willing to help if somebody asks, but a lot of times when we say yes, we leave it at that. And so in order to pay it forward for other women, to really help them, you have to be able to help them to help you by figuring out what it is that you can do that will help lift them up, their voice, advance them in their career, and so forth.